Kia ora, I'm Erin J. Doyle. Welcome to my channel. Today is Friday the 19th and we are partway into the Auckland Writers Festival. It does kick off earlier in the week, but the first couple of days there are usually just 2 to 3 events per day, and then it really happens Friday through Sunday. So I took today off work and I had a list of events that I wanted to go to this morning. I slept really badly. Like, all the events that I wanted to go to were done by the time I woke up. So, well, not all the events, the majority of the events. So the next thing that I wanted to go to wasn't until 4 PM, so I got all dressed up and I left my house an hour before the event. It is a 23 minute drive on the bus. So I left an hour before, and then I remembered that I didn't have any credit on my bus swipey card thing. So to put money on it, you have to go to the train station. So I went to the train station and their machine is broken, I can't put money on it. So I had to walk to a different train station, and I walked to the train station in the direction of where I wanted to travel anyway, and I figured I could put money on my card at that train station and then catch the bus at a bus stop near that train station. But no, there is no bus stop there. The closest bus stop was back the way I had come. So did a big, basically a big circle, went all the way back to where I started, got to the bus stop, only to discover that there's detours and delays with all the buses, and I was looking at the clock and I'm just like, I'm barely going to arrive on time, and then the bus didn't come, and then the bus was delayed, and I was like, okay, I'm done. So, no Friday events for me, because it was going to be, hang on, where are we? So there was an event at 4 PM that I wanted to see, and it was 20 to 4, and I was still at the bus stop, and I was like, so the bus is going to get me into the city barely on time, and then I'd have to also walk from the bus stop to the venue, so I was going to arrive late. And I don't like being late, I don't like it. And then the next event that I was really excited for wasn't until 6:14, so I was going to arrive in the city just on or just after 4, and then have to just kind of entertain myself for a couple of hours, or wait for a couple of hours before trying to go back to the city again. And I just, too hard, no, I'm not doing it. So I'm just throwing a bit of a tantrum. So tomorrow we will leave the house early and we will do things. But for now, we are abandoning any attempt to leave the house. Clearly it's terrible, unless somebody texts me saying yes, they want to have dinner. Not that they've responded yet. So yeah, that's me for today. I will check back in tomorrow, hopefully having managed to get to the venue in time for an event and without the drama. Now that I actually have credit on my bus thingy, the drama shouldn't exist. Additional drama was because all of this was happening right when school was getting out, and the train station that I had to walk to put credit on my card is near a school, and so it was literally a train load of screaming, running, shouting young humans. I'm like, ugh. So there was also that unpleasantness. For some reason, some of the little girls were wearing pink boas, and then another group were wearing pink fluffy tutus and tiaras. I assume it was a Good Friday for them. Anyway, I'm going to stop being a bitter old woman now. I'll see you tomorrow. It is now Saturday. I got slightly wet on my way home. Not terribly wet, but you know, public transport plus rain wet. So I've dried off and put on warm clothes and things. And I thought I'd best quickly film, because I'm getting a little bit of a headache. I think because today was kind of high density humidity for a really long time, and it just kind of used up all my energy and stressed me out. Not because it was like an unpleasant crowd per se, like it wasn't, you know, like loud and aggressive or anything, it was just a lot of people. And I think the reason it was so high density wasn't necessarily that this event is insanely popular, it's just that this venue is, frankly, I don't think it's really designed for all day events. First off, like, it's one major auditorium type room, so that's fine, but and then it has a few kind of smaller conference type rooms, and then quite a sort of skinny entranceway foyer along the front of the building. And in previous years that area has been busy, and anyone who wanted to get food or, you know, just loiter for a while in between sessions generally would leave the building and go find seating outside. There's a big square with seating, food trucks. In years past there were also cafes right there, although I noticed they're all closed down now. But it meant that the humanity got spread, whereas today it was pouring rain and everyone was just crammed into this one area. So you had people who were, you know, trying to get from one room to another for the next session, people lining up for bathrooms, people buying books, people just trying to stay out of the rain, people trying to get a drink, all in one really tight packed area. And yeah, like, there wasn't all that much consideration for other people. So anyway, complain, tired, stressed, post soaked in rain, not feeling great. But I thought I'd give you a quick rundown of what I did today. Oh yeah, the other thing that kind of annoyed me about this was because of the high density humans, there wasn't really a good place or nice angle where I could get decent B-roll, because it was always humans right across in front of the screen. Like, I couldn't you know, get anywhere where there wasn't someone in my face to get a general crowd shot or anything like that. I couldn't, not that I asked the people if I was allowed to film, but if I had tried to like film the like little stand where they were selling books, I couldn't have gotten a nice angle because it was just shoulder to shoulder humans. So yeah, grumpy, a little bit disappointed on the B-roll acquisition front, grumpy grump. Anyway, somewhere over here I have the notes that I took optimistically in case I learned anything. So aside from being annoyed, what did I do today? I went to an event called News and Poetry? Poetry and the News, sorry. For some reason I've written it incorrectly on my notes. Fortunately, memory has saved the day. So this was two poets being interviewed in kind of a sit-down chat situation. No, sorry, three poets. I was forgetting the person who's doing the interview was also a poet. So all three have had collections of poetry come out, and all three are quite well established writers. So they opened their session by doing like a short memorial for a New Zealand writer who passed away the day before. A couple of them, I think only two of them, I don't think the third one said she had met him, but definitely at least two of them had had a personal relationship with this author, sorry, poet. Clearly the coherency is going to be medium low for this section of the video, sorry. Yeah, so they talked about him, and one of them was chatting about how at one point the two of them actually lived just a few doors down from each other, and yeah, they used to hang out and stuff, but their dogs hated each other, and her dog attacked his dog at one point, and so it was kind of nice to you know, get that little personal touch into the memorial acknowledgement for someone who had passed away, because I think normally it would just be, you know, oh yes, this colleague, this is what their achievements that end, but this was like, you know, colleague and friend, and here is something a little personal and interesting quirk kind of thing, so it felt much more personal. So they were talking about the way that the news and current events were woven into the work that they have produced lately. So in one way or another, all three had incorporated nature, mostly because of climate change, but also other elements of the environment into their poetry. They also talked about COVID, obviously, and the effects of the lockdown. And then one of them, he was talking about getting up every day and watching the news and having lots of these different news providers that he checks every single morning super religiously. And then he briefly mentioned all of the big major events over the last 4 or 5 years and how they affected his writing. And then he talked about how he couldn't put Trump into poetry because there's nothing poetic about him, and he compared Trump to like a spoiled child with no manners throwing a tantrum. And then he held up this book that he had written and published where he had basically turned Trump into a 6-year-old girl. And I was just like, oh my god, I have to see this book. And after the session was over, I ran out to the book sales section and I couldn't find it, and I was just like, no, because I wasn't particularly moved to buy any of the 3 poetry collections that they were discussing, but that one kind of sounded hilarious and I wanted to at least look at it, even if it turned out not to be something I wanted to own, because he really did just kind of go, I did this thing, ha ha ha, and that was kind of it, because yeah, like he commented on like the art style and stuff, I guess, and not I guess, that was a statement of fact, and how the artist had incorporated Trump's hairstyle into the design of this young female character. I just thought it was funny. So yes, childish me was quite pleased, but I couldn't find the book for closer inspection. So like I said, this was just kind of a conversation about the way that the news influences their writing. I didn't really come away with it with like a very clear message or anything like that. Thought it was just kind of like a entertaining, I guess, conversation between 3 well-established writers in terms of what they find inspiring, but not method or anything like that. Then I was meant to head into a session on, it's writing in solitude. So without getting up and rooting through my purse to find the program guide, it was a session by a food writer and blogger, and apparently, I'm not familiar with her work at all, but apparently she has talked about living alone in isolation, that kind of thing, in the course of that, but that session got completely blocked out, filled out? Anyway, that was full before I managed to get into the queue for it, so instead I went to a random other event, which was tricky because obviously I didn't plan on going there, so I didn't do any looking into the speaker or the books or anything beforehand. I just kind of went, oh well, I don't have to buy a ticket to go to this event, and I go. And this was a Māori historian who was speaking with a member of his immediate family. So she was asking him questions, getting him to talk about his work, but they never introduced the book itself. They went in kind of on the assumption that everyone in the audience 100% already knew everything, didn't even need to read the book. So instead of getting up and being like, you know, this is the author, these are his credentials, this is his work, here's an interesting excerpt from it, now let's discuss it more in detail, it was just like straight into the discussion of details. And I was sitting there going like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I got from context only, that He was writing about an event, I assume a battle. Like it was really hard to follow, and there was also a lot of te ao Māori used in their talk, which for someone who's not particularly well versed in the language made it quite hard to follow. And I think if I had had a little bit more of an introduction, I might have had an easier time trying to keep up. Like I found that there were big sections where I was just sitting there going, I have no idea what you guys are talking about at all. So I think that was unfortunate, because he did have some interesting anecdotes and little random facts that he sort of shared and commented, oh, this isn't in the book, blah blah blah. So it perhaps would have been amazing if I had read the book, or if I had been raised in the same region. So I gather he's from the sort of Tamakima Koro area. I'm not. So he was talking about places in iwi that I don't know anything about. So again, that made it a little bit harder, because I was just like, okay, I know you're talking about a place now, but I don't know where that place is, and I don't know of its historical or cultural significance. And he didn't provide the context, so I thought that was really unfortunate. I took a whole bunch of notes. Also, apparently I have noted that people near me are talking, and I've drawn an angry face, so clearly I was also a little bit distracted. He did share an anecdote towards the end, which I don't think from context is in the book. It was just kind of, you know, again, one of those little embellishments that he shared, which I enjoyed. And I made a point of writing it down because I thought it was hilarious. He talked about how much his grandmother hated, really truly hated Pākehā. And he was raised by his grandmother and his grandfather, and when a Pākehā person arrived at the house, his grandmother would take him and they had to go hide in the bush and leave the grandfather to deal with them. And he was saying that as a child he didn't understand why they had to go hide in the bush, and he really wanted to go out where the Pākehā people were because he knew that Pākehās had lollies. I was like, oh, children. So yeah, I think that session, it was entertaining, but I just understood so little of what he was talking about. But you know, the bits that I understood were interesting. Alright, I had to change the camera batteries, so I might have the angle a bit funny now, but hopefully I didn't knock the stand too bad. So where was I up to? Then I went to a session called Writing Past Wrongs, and it was two writers who have recently released books set roughly 100 years ago. One was a work of fiction about a group of people of German descent, or Germans, living in New Zealand who were forced, well, collected up and put onto Somes Island, kind of internment camp style. Somes Island is just off the coast of New Zealand, North Island. It's not super far out. Some of our really far offshore islands like quite harsh because they're so exposed. This one's not quite that far away. I'm pretty sure you can just kayak there, that sort of distance. But it is nonetheless rounded up and chucked on an island because everyone's become suspicious of you. And yeah, so it's sort of about the people who are living there and what might have happened. And then she read an excerpt from her book where she was talking about the sort of culture of suspicion and hatred that developed, and you know, the thing of renaming anything that seemed even vaguely German. So that was interesting, and it actually sounded really good, but I for some reason didn't write down the name of the book. Like at one point I was sitting there thinking, ooh, do I want to go check this out on the book stand? But then I didn't write down the title of it, and then the book stand was just like wall-to-wall humans and I couldn't get a look in, so I'll try and remember to look for her book tomorrow. And the other author had written a non-fiction, but from context I get the impression that he had written it in kind of the relatively narrative style, not just kind of like a dry facts style. And this is about a New Zealand mayor who was investigated or arrested for attempted murder. This is another person who I felt whilst he did read an excerpt of his book and it sounded interesting, as he went on talking about his work, I actually found it a little bit hard to figure out what was happening. Like, I felt like I needed to have additional information to really follow along with what he was talking about, so it was a little bit unfortunate. They did briefly touch on an issue which I think is something I've definitely thought about. I think a lot of writers do, where there's this thing of, if you're writing about something which is true, do you stick to the truth? How much can you embellish? Is it easier to try and stick to all the facts, or is there freedom in going, oh no, I'm going to make it fiction, and can I embroider, and how much can I embroider? So they briefly touched on that, and I noticed that when question time came, that was a question that was brought up. One of the people who asked a question was a writer who was writing about an immediate family member and was asking about how much can I make up, kind of thing. I don't remember the answers overly, like I don't think there's anything overly poignant in the answer. It was basically, you know, do what you want, which I think is pretty much correct. Like, this idea of don't let the truth get in the way of a good story is basically what they said. They didn't use that particular line, but that was the gist of it. So that's what I did today, and then, like I said, I sort of attempted to look at books and went, oh, humans, and then stumbled out into the weather. Okay, that's me. I'm going to take some Panadol and have a drink of water, because I can feel myself being headachy and a little bit incoherent, and maybe water would be a good idea. Yep. See you tomorrow. Now Sunday afternoon. I've gotten home from the festival, having called it a day quite early because I started the day shattered and grumpy, a little bit indifferent, all because of the high human density that I had to deal with on Saturday. Today wasn't so bad though. I think maybe it was because of different events being on, but I think mostly the weather made that big difference. Yesterday it was raining the whole time, so people just milled around in the foyer, and it just made for this incredibly dense sort of cluster of humans. And I mean, no judgment or criticism, but a lot of them were elderly and very slow moving and like aggressively indifferent to the ways in which they were being inconsiderate to the people around them. So, as the elderly do. I mean, fact. So it was just really, really stressful. The only thing it didn't have was screaming children, really. Although it turns out it's because the children's area is on like the 5th floor, so they're quite separate. I had no idea there was even a children's section. I found it by accident today. So anyway, I got there really early this morning and I was aiming to go to a Te Reo Māori class that the author of this book was putting on. He did it first thing in the morning on Friday, Saturday and Sunday, and I've managed to be too late arriving 2 days in a row. Obviously Friday I didn't manage to get in at all. Goodness, I tried. It almost feels like fate is against me. I have taken Te Reo Māori courses 3 times in my life, admittedly whilst quite young, but nonetheless I still don't speak a single word. That's a lie. But I can't string together a sentence. And so it seems like, oh, of course I wouldn't be able to physically get to the event where there are lessons. Of course I wouldn't be able to get there in time. But anyway, so I arrived too late for his class, never mind. Went to a session that was right after it that was called Young, Brown and Queer. This was 3 young creators being interviewed by a 4th. The 3 people who were being interviewed each got up and shared some of their creative work. So one did a slam poem and she encouraged people to, you know, do the snaps thing if they liked it. One presented snippets from a film that she had made, so instead of just being like one scene, it was several little bits stitched together so you kind of get an idea of the story. And then the 3rd was Ruby Solly, who is the author of this book, Tōku Papa. She got up and read a piece, but in addition to that she had, I'm pretty sure she had the sound people play an additional noise with the poem, and then she also had instruments that she played throughout, so it kind of felt like the poem was bigger and kind of encompassing you and like surrounding you almost. So that was really interesting. I've never encountered someone using music in a poem. I've encountered many people doing a slam poem where they start singing, sometimes for no apparent reason, but poetry and song do go together. I understand that. I just don't personally like it, so I always find it like quite startling and unpleasant. But yeah, the use of musical instruments as opposed to singing was something that I haven't seen before and I quite liked it. So maybe I just don't like singing very much. I mean, I also hate musicals, so of course I wouldn't like random singing in my slam poetry. That's actually not a surprise if I think about it. Sorry if you can hear the beep 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 of the truck. I think the most interesting thing that was said was actually, I can't remember what the question was that led to this, but Ruby Solly, author of this book, made a comment about a piece of advice she had been given by Essa, the author of this book. And apparently they had told her when she was editing, I think this one, I think she said, that she should be also writing the next book. Not for like, you know, marketing, so you're constantly pumping out content kind of thing, but as a acknowledgement that you need to be creating all the time just to be happy, and that if you're just editing then you'll be miserable, and you should also be writing like something else whilst you're editing. And I kind of thought, probably got a point there, right? Like that sounds convincing, and I think like at the moment I've been trapped in editing mode for, it feels like, a couple of years. In fact, it might actually be a couple of years, and I don't make progress because it's kind of a bit miserable. And I haven't done anything creative, or if I have, it's been like a just for this one little period and I'll put the editing aside while I be creative for a bit. And I thought, well, maybe what I should do, instead of telling myself I'm going to edit for 2 hours a day and then feeling bad because I didn't have the bother to edit at all, maybe I should try and go like 1 hour edit, 1 hour write. And yes, that will slow down the rate of the editing, but if I'm happy because I got to do some writing, then actually maybe the editing rate will improve. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting observation that they had made, and apparently she tried it out and she was saying that it worked well for her, so awesome. I really wish I hadn't given a thumbs up, but I'm going to just move on. I do it sometimes in my videos. I'm always like, what is this? Like, why are you doing that? No, no, no. I don't like it. Anyway, so I went straight from their session into the Booker Ride, in which 3 Booker Prize winners were being interviewed. So it was the authors of these 2 plus the author of The Luminaries. In this session they were talking about the effect that winning the Booker has on an author, and they talked about sort of the process of being like longlisted, shortlisted, actually winning it, and the huge demand on your time that immediately follows. They talked about you know, being told you've won will be followed by 48 hours of like no sleep, no rest, just interview. I think one of the, I can't remember who it was, one of them commented that they got just a couple of hours sleep between winning the Booker and having interviews the next morning, like being picked up at 6 o'clock in the morning and being driven places. And so yeah, they talked about kind of that big intensity and how that affects when you can start working on your next project, and also like the expectation on your next project. There was a bit of a discussion about words would be very helpful right now. How you win the Booker and then it's like, well, you're amazing, surely your next book's going to be equally as amazing, and so there's this whole pressure thing. And the 2 people who have published books after winning the Booker had both in one way or another chosen a topic or a genre which was significantly different from the book that they won the Booker with, so that the new book couldn't be compared to that award-winning book, and it could just kind of exist on its own without that expectation and pressure being attached to it, which I thought was kind of interesting and good strategy. They also talked a little bit about whether prizes matter, and there was an acknowledgement of like, yeah, you say they don't until you win. They were talking about the impact that winning has on them and how it's super great and how it's been beneficial for other writers and the importance of other prizes. Specifically the Women's Prize was discussed, and then another prize, the name of which I can't recall because I'd never heard of it before, and if I can remember it I will put it here somewhere. So yeah, there was the discussion about using those particular prizes to give a bit of attention and emphasis to writers who were typically shunned for the Booker. So that was all very interesting, but something that I thought they kind of missed in that conversation was what it would be like if we didn't have these prizes, because they were sort of talking about how prizes in any industry are kind of pointless, and you know, in the past there have been comments about, you know, the winner was determined based on who was giving who drugs and who was sleeping with whom kind of thing, and that they're not really a true reflection of like who is in fact the best and that kind of thing. But I thought in amongst all of that there was something they missed, and I think particularly for writers, you get no validation as a writer. Like, if you picked up the guitar and started learning to play, even while you were still learning, you could go play on the corner and people would like throw coins into your hat kind of thing, and you could say, I play the guitar, and people wouldn't question if you started using the word guitarist to describe yourself. But with writing it's not the same, because everyone thinks that they can write, and sure, everyone can pick up a pen and apply it to paper, but that doesn't mean they do. And it doesn't mean that they have the ability to actually formulate an entire story beyond you know, a vague anecdote or concept. It doesn't mean they have what it takes to actually sit in the chair and put all of the words down. So I think there is a difference between the ability to write, just in general as a skill, versus the ability to write a book or a collection of poetry, etc. There is a distinction there, and we don't get any credit for being in that later group of the people who can, you know, stitch together a full narrative and actually put the words on paper, you don't get any credit for being able to do that until such time as you are published or win a prize. And I think, I can't speak from experience at this point, but I think even people who are published, there's probably going to be, you know, people who are like, well, self-published, or yes, but are you earning a lot of money, and that kind of thing. And I think there are lots of things we can do along the way that give us some degree of validation, like going from unpublished or aspiring to published gets you a little bit of validation, and winning a prize gets you validation. Winning a big prize gets you validation. And without that, people are very, very dismissive. And I think for me that's where prizes have value, is we undervalue the importance of writers, and we don't have opportunities for writers to be seen as good or skilled or real. Like, it's quite a limited way, or limited, there are a limited number of ways that we can become a real writer, and most of them are finance based, and that's really rough. Like, we know that most people, even if they're talented, even if they're good, even if they put in the work, will not earn a living writing. That doesn't mean they're bad, it means that writers are not adequately compensated for the work they put in. Anyway, so that's my rant about that. So I mean, that's why I think prizes are good. They are recognition and validation for a group of people who don't often get it. That wasn't discussed at this particular thing, but nonetheless it was very interesting to hear them talk about the experience and the things that they were told going into the actual final, like, event where they found out if they had won or not. Like, they were talking about, you know, there are multiple people who are shortlisted, and you're told there are certain seats that you might be put in. Obviously, if you're towards the front, you're more likely to have been the winner. And they were talking about, like, going in and taking their seats and looking around at where the cameras were pointing and that kind of thing, and trying to guess. So yeah, it was really interesting. They didn't talk very much about the writing process until people got up to us. Well, actually, I should rephrase. They didn't talk about the writing process at all until questions came, and a couple of people got up and asked questions. One of them asked about planning versus not planning, and I was surprised that all three of these Booker Prize winners were on the pantser side of it. They were just like, you know, yep, I have an idea of how I want the book to end, and then I just write until I get there, was pretty much the response that all three of them gave, which was quite a surprise to me. I think, I don't know, I just kind of assume that the successful writer puts in the work in advance and thinks about it and goes in with an amazing plan. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Will this affect the way that I write? Absolutely not. It was just kind of a surprise, I guess. And I was surprised that it was a surprise. Like, I didn't realise that I had that assumption until I was corrected from it. So anyway, I went to that and was inspired to purchase this one. I actually already owned this one, and I didn't re-buy it just so I could get it autographed, but I went and did the obligatory, wherever it is, signature from the famous person thing. But then I screwed up because I'm a very, very bad YouTuber. I met and spoke to the most recent winner of the Booker and the most recent winner of the Acorn Prize. Catherine actually, like, came and grabbed me and gave me a hug, because obviously I know her, but, like, I encountered them both today. I had my phone in my hand for both encounters. I did not take any pictures, I did not ask if I could film, I did not ask them any particular questions. I was just like, hi, how's it going? Like, I will never be a famous YouTuber, I am just not good at it. Which I then doubled down on, because I decided to just A, treat myself, and B, you know, B-roll. So having done that, I went to my 2 things, I got a signature, and then I had enough. So I headed out and I decided to walk to the far end of the CBD to go to the fancy donut shop. I got there eventually. There was a misadventure on the way, which I'm not going to share, I don't think. Anyway, got to the fancy donut shop and I asked if I could film, not the employee, but just like the case and the action of putting donuts in the box kind of thing. And I thought, cool, this will be my B-roll. Just as of putting the lid on the box, I realised I hadn't actually hit record, I mean. And the woman was really lovely. Like, I realised, I was like, oh crap. And she was like, you know, do you want me to quickly take them out and we can put them back in? And I was just like, no, because I don't care anymore. But it does mean no B-roll and also just failed attempts. Like, I'm not good at this. I feel like there's like a thing that's niggling at me going, there was another thing you wanted to talk about. But I don't know what it was. Like, what was the other... Oh, yeah, okay, so... So I noticed this on Saturday, and it was kind of reaffirmed for me again today. This event is called the Writers Festival. And it's really a festival for the successful writer to talk about the content of their writing. It's not a time where they talk about their writing process overly. There may be a single question thrown out in the course of a whole like 1 hour discussion that has to do with their process, but the audience members, if they get a chance to ask questions, those are the questions that they ask. And I looked through all of the events in this program and they're all like that. The only time you get to learn about the writing process is if you go to one of the masterclasses, which are $60. Like, that's pretty inaccessible for a lot of people. Also, these book out really fast, which is why I haven't done one in several years. And I just think what I would like to see is a regular session, like every single year there needs to be a session, perhaps in one of the bigger rooms, so like a general event type, not a little tiny masterclass off in a little conference room to the side, but you know, big venue type session with someone who is maybe like from the publishing industry, for example, talking about, you know, nuts and bolts important information that writers need to know, like what is the publication process in New Zealand. That's a conversation that I think a lot of New Zealand writers would really benefit from. Like, I have known people who have a master's in creative writing from a New Zealand university who do not have a grasp of the basic ins and outs of like professional editing services and what they do or do not provide or do for you. Like, I was talking to this woman who has a master's of creative writing, and she assumed that all research and fact checking for a non-fiction book would be done by your editor. I'm like, that's 100% not true. And she just kind of dismissed me as completely wrong. I was like, well, I guess you have the degree, what would I know? But she was wrong, right? And I think to me it kind of brought home this idea that we need access to the nuts and bolts information, and I think it does need to be country specific. I have a lot of knowledge that I've gained mostly from YouTube, right? Like, there is a wealth of knowledge about the writing industry on YouTube, but it's mostly America, occasionally UK specific, and the New Zealand publishing industry is going to be different. It has different priorities, it's a different size market, there are a lot of, you know, there's a lot of emphasis put on getting an agent for the traditional path if you're in the, I'm tripping over my tongue. If you are watching videos made by an American who does traditionally published work, they will be talking about getting an agent as being like the super important thing. I know a lot of published writers in New Zealand. I know one who got an agent. One. All the rest, successfully published award-winning New Zealand writers, have never had an agent. They've just gone straight to the publisher. But that's a very New Zealand specific situation, and maybe it's true for other countries as well. I wouldn't know. So this is why I kind of think we need access to an actual expert, not just some random person's opinion, you know, and it needs to be broadly available. So having it be like just a general event every year at the festival, you know, a representative from like this publishing house, or, you know, a professional editor, you know, people who are industry based, to just go and answer like frequently asked questions, outline the process. And I think every single year that session would be full. I'm certain of it. But anyway, that's my one thing that I think that they miss, is I think this festival is very writers talking about the content of their writing in a way that readers will find interesting, but they don't necessarily talk about the stuff that other writers would benefit from hearing, or are actually there to hope that they hear. Anyway, that's my one critique. So I guess that's it for the festival for this year. I'm going to go put these books away now and eat fancy donuts. That's my plan for the rest of the day. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like. Let me know down below what you would be interested in seeing if you went to a writing festival, what sort of content you'd be interested in. I basically just want to know if I'm crazy or if my idea is like good, just for my own vindication, I guess. And if you haven't already, maybe consider hitting subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye! Why is there always a truck during my sign off?